Historical Society. And I'll give you a couple little plugs before I turn it over to Jim. The Historical Society is working very hard to raise money to restore our train station. So we have a table over there, we've got books, we have pens, we have calendars, we got a donation basket. Tonight is free, but anybody who'd like to donate, obviously, we'd be very happy to have that. And also, there's a sign-up list. The Pod family has graciously going to allow us to do tours again this year. We did one last year, a group down at Keysville. Did Keysville or was it there? Keysville. That did one, and it was full, and then they let us do one with Jim leading us, and we had 3 full tours. So there's a sign-up list. We're going to do it again in October. If you're interested, sign up, and we'll contact you sometime before that. But I'm so pleased to see everybody come out tonight, and I think Jim does an absolutely fabulous job. He is the fort. So, Jim.
Thank you very much. This is a wonderful turnout. I am so pleased. I was just telling Calvin earlier, I have done probably maybe 12, 15, 17 of these. And every time I do them, I think, you know what, these people are not going to and no one's going to come. And I see this, and it's just so gratifying. Thank you all very much for coming. How many of you were here in 2004 when I was here? Hopefully not too many. Just a few of you. That's wonderful. I'm so pleased. I wish I put back the stuff I cut out. But anyway, this is it's such a joy for me to talk about this sport. I absolutely live and breathe this thing. I've been doing it now for, oh gosh, at least, I mean, I've been working intensively on Fort Montgomery research now for probably 7 or 8 years. And I kind of be thanking a lot of people as we go through here. Obviously, I couldn't do it without some very, very key people. But it's so wonderful to be back here in Rouses. This is your fort. It's people in Rouses Point have always felt very, very proprietary about Fort Montgomery. And so it's a real opportunity, and it's a pleasure for me, as an outsider, if you will, I'm from on the other side, to basically be able to do this. So thank you all very much for coming. I do indeed, first of all, want to thank the good folks at the Rouses Point Champlain Historical Society. Jerry, of course, I've been working with most, Mary Rossico. It's a wonderful group doing some great stuff. Like I said, when we did those tours last summer, people seem to think that, well, I've been to Fort Montgomery. I know I've seen it and I know it. But I got to tell you, I think people that had been there before, that took the tours with us, still benefited an awful lot. Because I'm able to share some insight about that old property that you may not have understood. And so if you're interested in going out again, please consider doing it, because we'd love to have you. And I certainly have no problem doing it. I want to thank very much Ann Thurber, PowerTex, and Ann has been really, really instrumental in helping me to get access to the property. The good gracious of Steve and Mr. Pod, the owners, have been very, 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 very kind to me, allowing me almost unprecedented access to that fort, because I could not give these presentations. I could not write the book, the first one, and the much, much bigger book, which again, I'm not going to give date anymore, but will soon be done, about Fort Blunder and Fort Montgomery, and the never created, never finished, or begun works down at Stony Point. But without the pods and without Ann working on the sidelines there to work things out between these very busy people and myself, none of this stuff would have happened. So thank you all very much for that. Roger and Doug Harwood, two of my closest friends, Charlie Barney. Some of the most wonderful photos you see into this evening came from these folks. Roger is the guy that was first instrumental in beating down the doors of PowerTex. Roger will do things I won't do. I tend to be a little shy, believe it or not. I'm good with this kind of thing, but I don't like to go up to strangers and make that conversation. So you come to me, please. Roger went to PowerTex and said, you know what, there's this guy from Vermont, and he wants to do the fort. And he got me in there, and it worked out very well. So Roger tends to take on those tasks for me, and also his brother is a pilot, and he's the wonderful aerial photos you see here today, and you may have seen the book by Roger. Charlie, his father, Charlie was a native, Rouses Point. His father died in 1963. He was a local policeman, and also worked at Dannemora State Corrections Facility. But Charlie was very, very instrumental in some of the wonderful little photos you see here, and many, many other photo contributors. People have sent me images from all over the world, literally. It's wonderful, and I have this website called America's Historic Place. If you haven't been to the website, it's a wonderful story about Fort Montgomery. I talked about that early tour I took with the Powertex people. I have some cards up here with a web address on it, my personal email address, which is to people, okay? And also the cards are up there, so please feel free to get that in before you leave. But there's people, this is not about me, it's about all the people that have been generous in sharing these things so that we can all learn the story. Well, that old report, you know, I started America's Historic Lakes back in 1997. It's become one of the most popular local history websites on the web. And I hear from people all the time, what can you tell me about Fort Plunder? What can you tell me about that old ruin just north of the bridge up there? You know, my parents would tell me that it was built in Canada. You know, other people would tell me that basically it was a total boondoggle. It never should have been built. All sorts of stories about that fort. And in my research over the years, going back to little newspaper articles way back as far as 1816, I have been absolutely flabbergasted by the differences of opinion, if you will, the misinformation, the incredible divergences of opinion about that old fort. Some is accurate, a lot of it is not. Okay, we're going to talk about just what the truth is as we go through here. Some of these things might surprise you. First of all, I want to tell you, I don't believe that fort was a blunder. Okay, I feel very, very strongly about this. Wasn't too long ago I didn't know anything about it except that it was just north of the bridge. And I knew something awful had happened to it, but it has become a real passion for me. But that fort we have out there, the ruins of it today, really were an excellent example of very, very important military technology from the period from the 1840s right up until shortly after the Civil War. It was, the architecture was state-of-the-art. No expense was paid or spared. It took about 30 years to build it. With any major weapon system, Congress cut off funds, Congress restored funds. But basically, the fort was built over a long period of time, and it was really quite an undertaking. But it was designed to prevent invasion and war. To understand, really, the story between those forts up there, and to understand that Fort Plunder, Fort Montgomery thing, a fort was built in Canada, a fort wasn't in Canada, what's the deal? You have to understand, everybody hear me? You have to understand there wasn't one fort, but two forts. This is so, so key, because a lot of the stuff you have read, quite frankly, is there was a fort there before the current fort. It was not called Fort Montgomery. It never had a name. It was referred to in contemporary writings, both British and American, Canadian and American, as the bomb-proof fort at Rouses Point, the works at Rouses Point, the battery at Rouses Point, but it was not called Fort Montgomery. Okay? It had a very, very short life. Something untoward happened to this fort in 1818. It really was never finished. Okay? It was not officially named Fort Plunder, obviously. Okay? It picked up that moniker around 1818, once that untoward event happened. Okay? It was finally demolished in its entirety in 1845, when this fort, the one we know as Fort Montgomery, was built. Okay? And folks, these are to scale. This is Fort Plunder. That's Fort Montgomery. Okay? It's really key to understanding it. Okay? And yes, this fort was built in Canada, but that one wasn't. So it's really an interesting story we're going to talk about. But I really want you to make sure we get the sense of this. This fort was only existed for a couple fort they started building in 1844. This is not Fort Plunder, this one is. If you believe that Fort Montgomery was Fort Plunder, don't feel bad, okay? It is absolutely remarkable that the misinformation that has been promoted, basically starting around 1900, okay, calling the second fort Fort Plunder, okay? And our local press Republican, I go back to these back issues, was one of the worst culprits. And the thing is the information was there. This particular piece here is from a Delaware and Hudson promotional brochure. DNH, of course, did all sorts of stuff like that. They're talking about Fort Plunder climaxing a century of mistakes, and they're saying right here, Fort Montgomery built by the United States on Canadian soil. And that wasn't the case. Okay. This particular article, this is the cover for page 1. This was published in its entirety in the Press Republican a little later on. But it's really key to understand that Fort Montgomery is not Fort Plunder. Today, same stuff's going on. Okay. Searching the web, I found site after site after site, and it was so hard not to put pictures of those websites up here. These are here because these are in the public domain. I can use these without worrying about copyright. Okay. But there is website after website after website with best plain wrong information about Fort Montgomery. Okay. It's just remarkable. And so anytime with the web, you have to put the buyer beware. Certainly the person using it needs to use multiple sources. But even to this day, the information is very, very common. Wrong information is. Canadian government. This website's still there. Government of Canada, Canadian military area. So this is right here. Fort Montgomery, the American fort built inside Canada. Okay. Okay. Fort Montgomery received its name in 1849. That's when the fortifications fort did it. That first fort was not Fort Montgomery. Okay. So we got that out of the way. Stuff in the media, stuff in the press, stuff on the internet. A lot of it is wrong. Well, why build a fort here? Why build a fort here in the first place? Well, a better question, a much, much better question, was why in the world wasn't it built sooner? Think about this remarkable waterway, this remarkable waterway between the St. Lawrence and the Hudson. You have, back then, in the early days of the Republic, or even before then, you have a howling wilderness. You've got the Adirondack Mountains on one side. You've got the Green Mountains on the other. You've got a navigable waterway with just 2 portages, one up at Chambly, another one just south of around the Ticonderoga area, and then, of course, the great one down near the Hudson River. So basically, a navigable waterway. Okay, right here at the northern gateway to Rouses Point. Okay, what's remarkable is that it wasn't fortified sooner. You have remarkable and really very important military bases here, Illinois. Think about what happened on these waterways through the years. Way back, long before the Europeans showed up, long before Samuel Champlain showed up here, you had Native Americans going up and down this waterway. Why? To make war on each other. You had the Abenaki and the Algonquian tribes basically making war on the Iroquois, and vice versa. And they would travel up the Richelieu, it wasn't called the Richelieu then, obviously, and back up and down Lake Champlain, even as far as the Mohawk River, to make war on each other. And they passed what we now know as Rouses Point. Later on, after the Europeans were here, we had one massive military occupation force, enormous armies. Under the First Indian War, we had Dieskau, Montcalm, Jeffrey Amherst. They would go north. They would come south. A little tiny passageway through the Richelieu from the St. Lawrence to attack the different forces because this was a very, very strategic waterway. It even extended to the American Revolution. Keep in mind, the United States, the American rebels actually invaded Canada up this passageway. They also went up through Maine. They went up here. They captured Montreal. Picture, if you will, this waterway covered with boats. Covered with boats. With all the military armies, all the armies and all their regalia, their drums beating, native allies, all covering these waterways as they would travel up and down. And of course, right into the War of 1812, when we had Murray's Raid coming down to Millard up there, the very ancient forts up there, and of course, finally culminating in the Battle of Plattsburgh, when General Prevost came down, and Admiral Downey culminating in the Battle of Plattsburgh, which really was the last major military action on the waterways. So, you see a little island point here. Island Point off of Rouses Point. To really get a sense of what, now this is new information, this is special for you folks at your Rouses Point. Okay? To really get a sense of why of the story about Fort Blunder and Fort Montgomery, we need to go back to the earliest possible maps in the area, the Tanner map. Now, the good folks at the Clinton County Historical Association, another wonderful group, they made some of the wonderful information available to me, but I wanted to show you this Tanner map because it's key to understanding early Rouses Point and understanding that place called Island Point right here. Okay. We have what we now know as the Commons. This became Fort Montgomery Military Reservation. Okay. Now, I know you can't really read this over here, but I'm going to read some of it to you. Okay. A is a bar projecting out into the lake. B is a perpendicular bank, 10 or 15 yards wide, okay? This bank is key. Very important to understand this bank right here, okay? We have high ground suitable for fortifications over here on the Commons. Okay, here's your gate. Here's where the modern day bridge is today. You have the ancient roads going up to the Col. Where does this go right through? Right through the Commons. Okay, it was really not much more than a oxen path, if you will. But it went up there. It was terrible. Okay, but that was the road that went up. So it's really important to understand this. And here you have an impassable morass, a swamp. This isn't there anymore, folks. This isn't there anymore. Okay? Something happened to it. But it's very, very important that we understand how this little island right here came to be fortified. I hope you get a sense of this. But one thing I really want to bring out, it's very important when we move on the next slide, right here. See this 45 latitude? Little tiny piece right up here, sticking north of it. Okay. Who knows the significance of the 45th parallel? Anybody? Just raise your hand. That's a good point. Okay. But anyway, 45th latitude, 45th parallel is always very, very important because that was the boundary line between Lower Canada and New England, or what we would call today Canada and the United States. Okay, that was the boundary. And notice where it is. It's up here in 1814. Okay. One of my favorite writers from the local writers from this period, the period of 1890s, is a guy named Reverend Daniel Taylor. Taylor has done almost everything that has been written about Fort Montgomery, so just recently, was taken from Daniel Taylor. And Taylor did a good job, of course, did a very, very nice job. Late John Ross did a good job with Taylor, of course. Mr. Reverend Taylor was very, very proud of that old fort out there, and he did a great job talking about early Rouses Point. Now, he's writing in the 1890s. He's talking about early Rouses Point. Remember what it was? You know where he pulled the first part of Rouses Point was? You can see little vestiges of it right here. That plateau. 45 to 60 yards wide. That's where the very first settlers settled. Taylor tells us that. Okay? Here you have the bridge. It looked very different back then, of course. Rouse's home was down around here. This tavern was down around here. Up here, of course, this is medium water. This is not high water. This is so-so water. Right here, where that 45th parallel used to go. Okay? This was called Province Point. A fellow named Bullis ran a ferry out there. He also ran a small store. But you have, on this narrow embankment here, 7 or 8 homesteads. They were farmed over here on the Commons. Their homes, believe it or not, were on that narrow embankment. Well, you don't have to believe me because I'm going to show you. These are some quotes from the good Reverend. Okay? Wonderful document. Absolutely love this. And it's key because it shows you, of course, in all its glory, two parts of Fort Blunder. You have the fort over here and the fort over here. Now, people have what do you mean two parts of Fort Blunder? It was. Okay? This is the original Fort Blunder. You have an octagonal, 9-sided, tiny little fort. It was high, 38 feet high, nowhere near as high as the first one. But it's right here. It's on Island Point. It's not even taking up the full size of the island. The dock is ridiculous as far as proportion goes. But you have over here what's called a gazon. Okay? An ancillary work. Another part of it. It was not, sometimes it's referred to in contemporary documents as a second fort. It wasn't a second fort. It was a key part of the whole fort, the early battery complex. Okay, I don't like that term, but sometimes I need to use it. But you had a redan here, which was basically nothing more than a beam. It was an earthwork. You had the masonry fort over there. Look at what we had here. Okay, see that long serpentine thing right there? Down here, which is the actual point, which is where the bridge goes across today. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 structures at least, including 3 over there on Province Point. Remember, where your 45th parallel is. Okay. What you have right here, now those of you who may have heard me back in 15th April of 2004, I told you I didn't know what that was. Yeah, I speculated it might be some kind of removable bridge, because I didn't have a full understanding of this ridge or plateau here. It's a pile, it's a bridge built on piles from the commons across that swamp or the morass. Okay? And it basically allowed access from Province Point. Now, Province Point was only an island at high water. Okay? Usually this was connected. It basically gives you a sense that this bridge, actually, the pilings of it were still there. In 1914, when the very last caretaker of Fort Montgomery, Tommy Burke, wrote his memoirs, which I happen to have, and will be the next book. Okay, he remembers seeing those pilings from this bridge when he was basically out there working on the fort, and he was the caretaker out there. So that was a bridge that helped get across that morass, and we went across on the tour last fall. I actually remember telling people this is where that bridge was. Very exciting moment. Okay. This is the only structure this is identified here. You can't see it, but it's called a guardhouse. This was a military structure. All the others were civilian structures. Now, these civilian structures were purchased by the military. Okay? Jacques or James Rouse had to move. He moved out of it. Okay? But his earliest home was right down here. Everybody had to move. Okay? That's where those buildings were. Let me tell you a little bit about Fort Blunder. It was it's referred to in earlier writings as 9 bastion. That's not accurate. Bastions, I'm going to explain to you what a bastion is. It basically had 9 octagonal sides. It was just a big, funky octagonal. Okay? The walls were 38 feet high. Must have looked pretty impressive. Okay? It was basically designed to mount 64 guns. There would have been 24-pounders. The guns were never brought out there. Okay? But you can see what it looked like. It was a case-made work, but there were no basements for bastions that they were doing. So I'm hoping you get a sense of what this looked like. This is actually a British document after the big thing happened in 1818. Here's something I want you to see. This is a wonderful illustration done by a British officer in 1818. He was going by on the ferry. You see those homes. You see those homes over there on that long serpentine causeway, if you will. Not actually more like a ridge. Okay? You have over here Melissa's Ferry. And you can see Home Beyond out here. You can see you've got a little side structure out here, but this is Fort Blunder in all its glory. Okay? When I first ran into this, I was absolutely beside myself. I had to spend a lot of time down in National Archives coming up with these documents. But I'm going to show you how this came about. This actually gives you a really good sense. When I first ran into this is what Fort Blunder looked like. It's exciting. Very exciting. Okay? Well, another thing you might not know is that Fort Blunder, that unnamed work, wasn't designed, it wasn't planned on being the only fort. Okay? Simon Bernard, who was basically brought over from France to start the fortification for it. The new nation basically was worried, scared to death of the war with Britain. Brought him over, and he decided to take it and then start doing these grand forts with bastions. These are bastions, okay? The original fort was supposed to be over on the commons. This was almost like another one of those ancillary works. Well, this never happened. But in 1817, a person no less than the President of the United States visited Rouses Point, Anthony Rowe. He came here and he visited the fort, he visited here. If you read that account from the Plattsburgh Republican in 1817, he spent most of his time on the commons, looking at the site of this enormous fort which was planned but never built. Okay, so you have the fort that was built, the fort that never was built, and of course then we have a little dam at the actual point of Rouses Point, and those up here, latitude 45. Okay. Well, let's talk about how Fort Blunder was built on Canada and Fort Montgomery wasn't. Well, we're going back to that illustration again, because you need to get a sense of what happened with the actual border. For the longest time, the border north of Rouses Point was not in question. Okay? There were questions about the border. Over in Maine, nasty disputes. To the west, the nasty disputes. But nobody believed that the 45th parallel, which was that accepted boundary line, it was surveyed by a couple of guys named Valentine and Collins, back in 1771, 1772. There was no question about it. But one of the provisions of the Treaty of Ghent, which basically ended the War of 1812, was we're going to finally survey that border, we're going to mark it, we're going to get it all perfectly clear, we're going to get it all squared away, and we're just going to, that's one of the provisions of that, just to fix things once and for all between Great Britain and the United States. Well, what happened was, in 1818, a couple of guys named Hayarks started the survey. Where did they start? They started just north of Rouses Point because they figured it'd be a piece of cake. They do the hard stuff later. Well, the very first fort, the fort down here, it started in April of 1816, April of 1817. And by October of 1818, and as soon as they start their survey, they say, oh, we have a problem. We have a big problem. You know where the 45th parallel is? It's not up here where everybody thought it was. It's really down here. It's really right down here. These guys were right. These guys were wrong. So what happened in October of 1818? Everything stopped. Everything stopped. We have an oops. We have a serious oops. Okay? Because the government is spending a huge amount of money on these fortifications. You've got settlers who basically are living in a no man's land. Okay? And this property, remember, was part of the original Canada-Nova Scotia land grant. So you basically have people who just plain don't want to get back to Britain because they actually sided with the colonists during the American Revolution. So you've got all sorts of controversy here, all sorts of ill will. Matter of fact, these guys, when they had to make the report, Burlington actually wanted an armed escort because they were scared to death. Word had leaked out, and they didn't want to get this information. And sure enough, they went to Burlington, and I don't know how else to put it, but all heck was loose because it was not well received. So you get a serious issue here, and Canada got a fort. The fort finally got a name. The military didn't work with some contractors who were pretty darn disgusted because they didn't get paid, did. So we got the name Fort Blunder. And that's the long story short there. Well, in 1842, things changed again. Daniel Webster, ever heard of him? Everybody knows about Daniel Webster, but nobody knows about this other guy, Ashford. They got together, they went over to Canada, and they worked things out. And what they did, jogged the border to the north. Back to the original line. So if you look at it to this day, 45th parallel is still the boundary. except here in Rouses Point, where it jogs up just a little bit north. This distance, is to accommodate this guy, these guys right here. But it didn't happen until 1842. So from 1818 to 1842, this was Canada. So you get the first fort that was built in Canada, and when the second fort came along, it was back in the United States. Well, there was a plan B, okay? Too many things had happened on Lake Champlain. Too many nasty armies had come down. The army could not put a fort there. So as early as 1836, they started looking for another solution. Stony Point stood out. Okay? So surveyors got to work. All set to buy some fort. They're going to buy another piece of swampland. Stony Point, you ever been down there? It's nasty. You can see it showing up. But basically, they were going to build a fort there. Very impressive fort. Almost bought it up. Okay? General Montgomery C. Meigs, he wasn't a general back then, but he became very, very prominent. He drew up very impressive plans for that fort that was supposed to go down there at Stony Point. Well, this didn't have to happen. But this was a remarkable. When I went to the National Archives and I found this thing, I was absolutely flabbergasted. Because it was a plans for a fort that never happened. But it was going to be huge. It was going to take and hug the shoreline right there. It was going to be this enormous hornwork. If you want to find out a lot about this, you have to get the next book. But it was basically quite a structure, and it never did happen. And why did it not happen? Because of a change that happened in 1842. This is a fairly new slide. Last time I came here, people asked me afterwards, they said, you know, why in the world would the United States even want to build a fort after the War of 1812? They didn't have any enemies. So there have been people that have written and said that Fort Montgomery was a blunder only because it never should have been built. But it's really, really important for us to get a sense that the War of 1812 did not end the nastiness, if you will, between the United States and Great Britain. Just didn't do it. Okay? You have nasty rebellion that took place in Quebec in 1837, 1838. All sorts of awful things were happening here on the border. Rouses Point was right in the thicket. People would attack into Canada from Rouses Point. They'd run their guns up here. A lot happened down in Buffalo, but it happened here in Lake Champlain too. You think the Brits liked this? No, they were not happy about that. There were the border controversies. There was some awful stuff going on about the Maine territories, the Oregon territory. And of course, you have this manifest destiny, this drive for annexation of Canada. And you don't think that really happened? This is a bill from 1866. I can't see the date, I'm sorry. But anyway, this is a bill went through Congress for the annexation of Canada. I think they asked Great Britain about that? No, they did not. Okay, but the bill did pass. But of course, we do have this thought. It was very, very prominent at the time. The United States should have Canada. Canada really wants to be with us. Well, they think they were learning a lesson from the American Revolution in Canada. Maybe it didn't, you might not. Anyway, this was a big deal. And of course, you had some incidents on the Great Lakes. You had the American Civil War. People don't realize that during the American Civil War, the United States was suffering death. Great Britain was going to come in on the side of the Confederates. They were really, really worried about that. And the Trent Affair, happened in 1861, brought Great Britain and France, believe it or not, as close to war as they had since the War of 1812. And France said, if you go to war with the United States, Britain, we're going to come in on your side. So that was a very, very scary thing. Okay? The Trent Affair was a nasty time, very, very frightening time. Of course, you had the Fenian Raids, where these crazy Irish people decided they're going to take it and invade Canada from Vermont and New York. Well, none of this happened with Britain. So there were all sorts of problems. All sorts of problems that happened, basically. And so, yeah, it made sense to go to war. It made sense to go to war. Right up until 1872, when Britain finally took the Treaty of Washington, they took their troops away. So that's why Fort Montgomery was done. Well, let's keep talking about Fort Montgomery later. Okay? This you may have recognized. This is the very first plan that was ever drawn up at Fort Montgomery. And I have an awful lot of plans, folks. I spent an awful lot of time, an awful lot of money in the National Archive, digging up this stuff. But I gotta tell you, this is so exciting, because here's Fort Montgomery going up. Here's the piles going in. You know, here's the piles going in. They're actually putting up in the village. They put these enormous stone masonry walls on. What do you got in here? You got the old fort coming out. And you don't have the document that went along with this. The document says what we're doing for you. Drilling the piles, the very first pile driver ever used on Lake Champlain is up here. We're putting these piles in. They've got these big copper dams out here, and they're tearing down what's left of the old fort as they're putting up a new one. So I was absolutely thrilled to see both forts in the same plan. Okay? But you notice this also showed me something else too. I knew, but I couldn't convince people. Fort what? It's an unnamed fort. So anybody that tells you that Fort Montgomery got its name from that first fort, the War Department named the fort in 1849. Fort Montgomery didn't have a name for 5 years. Okay? It did not get its name from the first fort. It certainly wasn't called Fort Montgomery. Okay? You had an unnamed fort. Construction, local and still in place. Okay? Well, here's a then and now. Hopefully the first of several you're going to see this evening. I have a lot of material, folks, and I hope you'll bear with me. I have to move fast through some of this stuff. I could talk for days, but I'm going to move fast through some of it, probably faster than you like, but I really want you to understand what I'm doing. We have, of course, a wonderful picture showing Fort Montgomery in all its glory, but the decorating of the actual original dock out here. Of course, you have the south face of Fort Montgomery today. Okay. It's important to get a sense of what these forts look like. And I want to early on show you what we have out there today. Okay. Third system forts, that's what they're called, third system or permanent system of fortifications. That's the name that Joseph Totten, the chief engineer, called these. This is very, very typical. These things, folks, are bastions. So when you hear it, we refer to bastions. These points that stick out here are bastions. Okay? These are called curtains, these straight sections in between bastions. Okay? Third system fortifications were always identified the same way. When I refer to bastion A, it is the one right here jutting out into the east. Bastion B, bastion C, bastion D, and likewise going in a clockwise manner. We have curtain 1, curtain 2, we have the gorge or curtain 3, and vice versa. I hope you get a sense of what I'm talking about as I go through here. Here's what you have almost completely intact today. Okay? There's still a lot of Fort Montgomery to see. It's hard to understand that sometimes when you go out there in the dead of August when the vegetation is as lush as it's ever been, because you can't see that. But as you can see, right here, is largely intact. If you can get around the graffiti, you can still see that fort as it was intended to be. Bastion B, other than a stairway here, is still largely intact. Curtain 2 didn't fare as well. A lot of people don't realize that outer gorge, that outer scarp wall, this is what's called the scarp, is really largely just holding itself up, okay? Because the whole top part of it is gone. If you look at some pictures, you see that. Okay? This part here still has key parts of the infrastructure. Okay? You have the enormous arches that people have seen. All those arches were very, very key in these third system fortifications because they were designed to support these enormous 15,000-pound guns, one on top of another. So those arches were important. We had the arches down here in the officers' quarters. You still have the lower tier over on curtain 2. Unfortunately, Bastion A, curtain 1, curtain 5, all you have basically is a little bit of the scarp wall left. We don't know what's under the earth here. We don't know what's there. I'm hoping there's some good part of the superstructure left, but that's why you can see people out there. And unfortunately, the gray, grade is largely gone. If there's anything left, it's under the ground, and it's largely, most of it was destroyed, almost entirely. So, there you have it. A wonderful illustration showing Fort Montgomery in all of its glory at high water, circa 1920 from the seaplane. You can see the bastions, you can see the curtains, you can see the enormous cover face. We're going to talk about that a little bit over here. And you can see what happened in 1947. Okay. Let's talk about the building of Fort Montgomery. This is the only contemporary illustration that has come to light of Fort Montgomery being built. And this was actually built, drawn up by a British magazine, circa the American Civil War. And it's actually really accurate in some ways because the derricks are where they're supposed to be. The stone is being brought in where it's supposed to be, right out here around just to the north of Bastion B. And the stone came in from two quarries, okay, but you can see, get a sense of what Fort Montgomery was being built. It was started in 1844, right after Webster Ashford changed the border so the United States could give up Stony Point and go back to where they wanted the fort in the first place, up here at Rouses on Island. Constructed over a 30-year period. 30 years isn't because it took 30 years to build these forts, it's because it basically would start and it would stop. It would start and it would stop. A lot of these lovely old stone buildings that you see in the area on both the Vermont side and the New York side, up in Quebec, these were built by the very same stonemasons who were working on the fort. And when funding ran out, what they do, they fanned out into the countryside and they would basically build stone houses. Okay? Remarkable thing to think about. Some of these stone masons actually worked on that fort for the entire 30-year period. That was a part of their life. They were there in the beginning and they were right there starting to complete. Joseph Cotton, I wish I had time to talk about him more because he was a remarkable fellow. He was the very same person who actually built the first fort, Victoria's Fort Leonard. It was built upon that grillage of timbers I talked to you about. It was basically these piles that were driven, a grillage of timbers, and then they actually put the stone on top of that. Stone came from two quarries. It came from Isle of Mont, Kings Bay Quarry, in Isle of Mont, Fish Quarry, over there, and it also came from Kings Bay Quarry, just south of Point of Firth. The earliest stone came from New York. The stone is two different colors. You could actually see it in vintage photos. The earlier part, basically the New York stone was a little bit darker. It's limestone. The bricks came from a place called Webb and Rodden. Anybody knows where Webb and Rodden is, please let me know. Okay? Wonderful. Yeah, because most of the brick, and an enormous amount of brick came from there. Okay. Donna? I can't see real well. Yeah. Okay, thanks. The total size of that fort, the cover page 3+ acres. Okay? And the stone came, like I said, from this quarry. It also came from, the remarkable story about this quarry. You go up just north of the Ross Point. There's a place called, I mentioned earlier, called Millard. And there's a wonderful little fort up there. Okay, it's a British fort called Fort Lennox. Now, Fort Lennox was built in response to that very first fort, the unnamed work, what we know as Fort Montgomery. The stone came from the same quarry. Think about that. You know, Vermonters, you go up there and there's these wonderful interpreters. Not only is it wonderfully restored, but the interpreters up there are so great. And they just love telling a story about how this stone came from the very same quarry. Okay? Well, Vermonters have always been very enterprising. If they don't support a war, well, I got to tell you how they don't support a war. During the War of 1812, what did Thomas MacDonald have to do? He had to intercept as the Vermonters were putting spars up to the British. The Vermonters were cutting the trees down and setting masts up for the British fleet to come back down and actually attack. Imagine that, but that's what happened. Vermonters were also herding beef cattle across the border to feed the British troops. So, money does not know any boundaries, and they will tell you that. But you have, it's the same stone tools, it's a remarkable story. And if you go to this lovely little museum up here, in this building right here, you get to see it. I wish I had the time to talk about this slide here. This is basically a daily report in the day in the life of the building of Fort Montgomery. And this is from 18 died during the time when the fort was going great guns. There were 400 people a day working on Montgomery. During the Civil War, things really were going crazy. And that fort was really sped up. All kinds of money was put into it. Imagine the incredible influx of craftspeople, tradesmen, that was in this area at that time. In a little tiny town of Rouses Point, because this enormous fort was being built. You had stonemasons, you had carpenters, you had laborers, you had teamsters, you had every imaginable type of craftsperson was in the area. Think about the brickyards, think about the stone quarries. It was just an incredible thing, and I wish I had the time to talk about it, but I can't. This is just, on this particular day, there were 17 and a half people working on the fort. I don't know about the half a person. It's commentary on somebody's work, or if it was a half timer, but it's remarkable. And if you're ever interested, actually I do have a transcript of it. I actually transcribed this, and it'll be in the new book. Maybe I can see this in detail. But it was a wonderful document. Architectural features. Fort Montgomery, by no means, was unique in the features it had, but they were incredible things to see. Some of the things we're going to talk about are spiral staircases, the powder magazines, the case facing braziers, this earthen cover face, this enormous man-made island, which yes was a key part of Fort Montgomery. You know what? This enormous cover face was all man-made. You know where it came from? It came from that original serpentine, snake-like thing that Daniel Taylor called Old Rouses Point. You go out there at certain times of the year, you can still see it sneaking up. I showed you that wonderful picture by Roger Harwood. That was that original, and once, that's where all that earth came from. They took one bank, and they moved it over here. We'll talk about why they did that, okay? But they built this enormous bank here to protect that western front. There were these incredible spiral staircases. And the only other thing that's similar to this area are the lighthouses. The lighthouses in the area basically were very, very similar. Here you can see a detailed section of the plans. The spiral staircases held themselves up, and their sole purpose was to be near the powder magazines to allow quick access on the grade to the different tiers. The different tiers, you had the casement level, you had the barbette tier. And these stone staircases were incredible things to see. This is a wonderful glass slide from the Architects collection of the late Victor Todd. It's stained, but it's a gem because it's basically showing you the part that you see from the Rouses Point Bridge. Okay? This happens to be curtain number 2. You can see the casemate, you can see the batteries. But what you have right here, folks, are the wooden enclosures that actually were on top of those staircases. Those disappeared very, very early on. Okay? Most pictures of the fort do not show those staircases. They're basically just designed to protect those staircases from the elements, let a little bit of light in. Those are very unique features that you don't see in a lot of pictures. Okay? Spiral staircases today, let's see how they were built. Basically, unfortunately, none of the staircases do survive. Okay? Wonderful pictures of Charlie showing some of the local folks out there on these staircases. This is after the structures were removed. And this is the same staircase. This was a batch of these staircases today. Okay? These people were up on what's called the barbette tier, the very, very top tier of the fort. And you can see, of course. But there are some steps still around. Some of those steps are still there. They made an easy mark for the demolition people. Fort Montgomery had either 4 or 8 powder magazines, the main magazines, depending on how you want to talk about it. And this is what they look like. The powder magazines were very, very important structures. Every time an inspector would come, they had to basically pay close attention to the powder magazine because obviously wet powder is no good for anything. Okay? They were very, very well designed, very ingeniously designed. Like I say, 4 or 8 is because you basically have one enormous structure here. There was a floor right here. So you had a second tier powder magazine, you had a first tier powder magazine, and you can see a floor choice right here. All the powder magazines that brought in at Fort Montgomery are still there. Scary things, okay, because they're pitch black, and they're probably one of the largest reasons why. pods don't let people up anymore because it's very, very frightening places. That way you can illuminate, of course, this with a very, very powerful flash. But they would have been covered with wood, and they would have, the maintenance of powder magazines was very important. And it is dark inside. Getting a sense of what the sport looked like inside, there was, of course, one big section where the officers slept and was the floors. This was a business end. Okay. What I'm going to try to do is I step through these slides and give you a sense of where we are. This is the western side here, folks. This is the side where the commons would be over here. The arrows are always showing you the view the photographer has. Okay, so you are looking basically to the northeast here. Right? These were called casemate tiers. You had a casemate tier here, okay, and a casemate tier and a barbette tier here. This section here was always consisting of storage rooms, sergeant quarters, kitchens, okay? There were no guns in this lower tier, except in the bastions, in the gang bastions. Each of these held either a 10-inch Robin or a 32-pounder on a little terror, okay? But this was the reason this fort was built, okay? There would have been a gun in each of these casemates. On top of that, there would have been another gun. There would have been one here, one here, one here. So you basically have gun on top of gun, each one weighing 15,000 pounds on a carriage. Okay, so this is why these forts were built. This is an early picture. You still have some of the windows, some of the doors. This is Bastion A over here, Bastion A over here on the east. You see it right there. Okay, this was for a catwalk. But I want you to get a sense, and of course you have a stairway in here. Okay. Here's another view. This is basically very similar, and I want you to get a sense of it. Okay, you have the barbette here up here, barbette, French for platform, which was a gun which was set on the platform. The casemate here, okay, and of course your bottom tier, which was, like I said, for the utilities. Parade, you may have heard the term parade ground. Well, third system fortifications did not call it a parade ground, they called it a parade. Okay, just one little tidbit here. Fort Montgomery, because it was built over a 30-year period, and you have the advantage of being able to incorporate new technology as this fort was built. Okay, you may have noticed you have at the lower tiers you have these bricks and the embrasures, whereas on the second tier you have a hardened masonry reinforced with iron embrasures. These were built later. Okay, a lot of people don't understand that Fort Montgomery was armed long before it was built. And only a tiny part of it was facing Canada. They don't have guns out facing Canada. Okay? A lot of people think that because this fort was never completely finished, it never served as any kind of a deterrence. It's really important to understand that this fort had guns, and it actually had guns long before it was finished. Okay? But anyway, you've got new technology here, the older technology down here. Here's a better picture of it. Ironically, the newer technology has not weathered as well. The iron bands are falling into the lake. That masonry is not doing well. The iron base isn't holding up the elements, but you basically have these hardened bricks in here. You can imagine these are the most vulnerable parts of the fort. Certainly, if you were a gunner, you'd much rather be in a much narrower opening than this big opening you have down here. This is looking due west towards the cover face. Okay, here you have an interior view. Okay, you have a big wide opening in the lower tiers. You have a pintle for a 24-pounder flank howitzer here on both of these. I'll explain what that is in a little bit. That is basically a key part of those guns. Okay, so you have the old embrasures, the new embrasures. Fort Montgomery had both of them. Once again, it's a size. You've got the first fort, you've got the second fort, and you have this huge piece down here, which yes was part of the fort. Okay, enormous, completely man-made island. You've heard me talk about a cover face, so that's what this was. Okay, it was huge. It was all brought in from Phil. It came from that original serpentine piece of what they call Old Rouses Point. It also came from the Commons. It also came from, as they were taking and digging out what was known as the wet ditch or the moat. Okay, but Daniel Keller in his book said, old Rouses point lives on in this massive cover face. Okay? Well, what was this cover face for? What was the whole idea of doing this enormous amount of work to build an island? Okay? Here you have an aerial picture, courtesy of Roger and Doug, showing that cover face. Now think about this, folks. It doesn't look like much right now, and it really isn't much right now, because what you have is it's hard to even imagine it, because it's so different from what it was then. Back then, you wouldn't have had anything growing higher than a dandelion back then. That cover face would have been kept completely mowed. And in fact, Army regulations say you have to keep weeds off it. It has to be kept completely clear. And of course, nowadays you have trees and a lot of growth out there. And basically, Mother Nature is doing her best to take back Fort Montgomery. So you have an awful lot of growth out there, but you basically have a situation which was kept completely clear. What's the point of this? Think about it. What did these invading armies do? They came down on boats. Okay? The thinking was, you're still going to have an invading army when they come down on a boat. When you fire a gun at a masonry fort, what happens? Okay? Water. The gun bops up and down. Okay? It's very, very hard when you're firing at a fort from a boat to always hit the same spot. Pulverize, if you will, that wall. Because you've got the recoil, you've got the wave action, this type of thing. However, if you come around the fort and you set siege guns up on the commons, okay, you put siege guns up on that big land piece on the other side of that morass or that swamp, okay, you put them over here, you can hit that same, this vulnerable western side, the gorge, over and over and over again, you can basically blow it to heck. Okay? So what you have to do, you had to build this enormous island to protect this vulnerable western front from siege guns. It's the only purpose for it, was basically to protect that vulnerable western front. Even Fort Blunder had what's called cover base. It was made of masonry. Okay? It was much smaller, but it was basically the same type of thing. It was basically designed to protect that vulnerable western or landward front, the gorge, from siege guns. Okay? There were two entrances to Fort Montgomery. You had the main front here. You can see this enormous cover face. You had what was known as the postern, or the sally port. And you had another very important entrance over here on the lakeside, okay, which is basically where the guns were brought in. You could not bring guns, those enormous guns, across this very little bridge right here. You had a drawbridge right here we can talk about, but you basically had to bring the guns in here. Now this interesting picture from Tyler is one of the very few pictures you'll see that actually still shows some of the mounted guns. This is a 10-inch rod, this is an 8-inch rod up on the barbette tier at Fort Montgomery. Okay, you can see them peeking up over the top. Okay, but I want you to get a sense that there are only two entrances to that part. This is the one we all know about. This was actually the wrong part. Here we have an illustration showing that postern. This is the business entrance, the main entrance. This is where the officers, what have you, when they came to inspect to come through. This is the other side of the grade wall. You have basically the outside and the inside of that side for the postern. Okay. Armament. A lot of the contemporary and older documents tell you Fort Montgomery was never armed. It's not true. Fort Montgomery received almost only half of all of its complement of guns. It was assigned to hold 125 guns, or something like 73 of them were mounted. Okay? So Fort Montgomery is certainly a gift. We have the proof. We have the documents. Okay? We have the armament reports. We know where they were. We know which of those batteries they were put in. We actually have the documents to show that Fort Montgomery was indeed armed. Okay? I had to skip through this fast, but I wanted to give you a sense of what these guns look like. These were Rodman guns mostly. They were 8 and 10-inch Rodmans. The 10-inch Rodman would fire a 128-pound ball over 3 months. So if you think about how far it is from one side of the lake to the other, these guys certainly could have done their job. Okay? They were designed to rotate on a pintle. Basically, you had a wheel here, and those guns would basically rotate from side to side. Okay? You had an 8-man crew that would basically take it and push these things so that they would swivel on what's called a traverse circle. The center on the top, you can see the wheels, and you can have to see the traverse circle. Okay? This is the mainstay 18 of these particular guns that were mounted, okay? This shows you Kenneth Robbins. It's a little deceiving, but it shows you what the carriages look like, show you what the guns look like. But these were basically, was designed to mount 53 of these guns on the barbette tier, or the top tier, and 18 of them were actually mounted up on the very top. This is a wonderful illustration from Fort Knox over Maine, showing you what those platforms look like. This could be Fort Montgomery, folks, in front. You have the pintle right here, the red gun with it rotated on, you have the traverse irons, and that gun basically would have just swiveled on that to give you a full range of fire. And it fired over the wall. Okay. There were also, Fort Montgomery was also designed to have 8 center-mounted and center-mounted guns. And these would basically be able to rotate completely around. All right, pintle was in the middle. At Fort Montgomery, these guns were never mounted. There were several of these enormous 15-pounders that were on the cover face, on the parade, but they were never mounted. So there were 8 of these that were planned. Here you can see what they were. This is again is up at Fort Knox. Incredible firepower. Several of these were there. They were brought to Plattsburgh. They were all melted down in the scrap of the Second World War. And before the Rodmans were there were the old style 32-pounders and a wooden carriage. Fort Montgomery had 7 of these. These were actually mounted during the Civil War. You had an old wooden carriage. You had an old 32-pounder type gun, and these were right there. Actually, 7 of these were there right up until the end. Okay. This is a 24-pound, a little deceiving, but it does give you a sense of what that wooden carriage looks like. Once again, rotated on a traverse circle. Okay. And here you get a sense of how that pintle worked inside the cable machine. Okay. This is a case-dated one. The other for barbette here, the top here, these are the ones that would be inside. And Fort Montgomery had 40 flank howitzers. Flank howitzers were big, nasty shotguns. They were designed basically to prevent, as a last line of defense, if anybody are close enough to the walls, they're nothing but big, nasty shotguns. They would fire stuff like canister shot and grape shot. And all 40 of these were mounted in every one of the flanks of the cable. And unfortunately, here you get a sense of what that canister looked like. You get a sense these were actually wooden carriages. You get a picture, a sense of what these actually look like. These are big, nasty shotguns. And there's only one left. And it's actually an Isle of One. Right in front of that beautiful stone library over there. If you want to see one of Fort Montgomery's guns, the only one that I know that's still around, it's actually been in front of the library now longer than it was at the fort. The guns were taken out late in 1909. And in my recollection, this gun has been sitting there ever since then. It's in remarkable good shape, remarkably good shape considering. Quite proud of it. Rouses Point, Fort Montgomery has always been a very, very special place for local people. I'm going to step through these fast. You can see some wonderful pictures that can speak for themselves. We have some great pictures. You could never do anything like this, of course, today. But during the 60s, there were Boy Scout camporees. Ms. Lawrence basically donated this picture for Charlie so I could use it. She's here today. Thank you very much, son. But you can see it here. It's a great picture. This is Chuck and Dad up on the bench here. That picture, this is probably just part of the demolition. It's always been popular with local people. Always been popular with local people. They go there to court, they go there to have picnics, they go there to have all sorts of gatherings. They go there to play. Even after the fort was boarded up, the costume was boarded up, people would still go because the cover face itself was wondering to see this enormous man-made island. Take a look at it. Quite a famous issue. Like I said, you're stepping through it. This is wonderful because you can see the original drawbridge here. Okay, after the fort, so they basically put the draw into position, and you can see it. People went up on the barbette here. Gem of a photo. Gem of a photo. Got this through eBay. Individual named Mr. Patrick from Champlain told me about this, and thanks to the good graces of my friend Roger Harwood, we managed to acquire this photo. But I am absolutely thrilled with this because pictures of the guns of Fort Montgomery are very, very rare. I can't absolutely positively promise you that this is from Fort Montgomery that I've released. And because I know the picture of this. That's an absolute gem. Okay? People even would build flagpoles and they just so they could climb. Okay. Charlie Fitch, the military did not put this flagpole on. The military flagpole was not there. This is back and put in the pinnacle. But I don't know how long he was up there. I don't know why he went there, but I guess it's one of the things they did back then. They would actually take it. Well, the property is posted. It is posted of necessity, folks, okay? And when I first put together with the Todd folks and Victor and Stephen and Ann, one of the things they were concerned about, if I'm going to tell this story, is the focus. You know, if you're going to put this story on the web, if you're going to, basically, we've had a situation where these are different times. These are different times, folks. It used to be anybody in brother could go out with us and going out to Fort Montgomery. And there's nothing really thought about it. Boy Scouts used to go out there. But things are different nowadays. Okay? You just plain can't do that. And so common sense said that that property has to be posted. I know for a fact there were drinking parties and drug parties out there. I was actually contacted by the New York State Police one time because they're going to go out there and they're going to bust out this big drink party. And I'll show you some of the reasons why. When the Western people left, and I'll talk about who the Western people were, they sometimes left an awful mess. This is an entranceway to one of those magazines I showed you. Okay, that's about a 40-foot drop into utter blackness there. Okay, here's part of the bastion that basically has collapsed. Bastion C. Okay. This is one of the stairways. I'm taking this picture from up on the barbette here. Imagine young people out here in this position. Here we have Tier 1, Tier 2. This is Bastion C that collapsed in April of 1980. Okay. Here's the gentleman that contacted me, the Officer St. Louis. He wanted to hand out things to the officers who were going to be out there. And every time I have gone out to Fort Montgomery in my research, I have basically had with me a release that I have built out. When we had tours out there recently, everybody has to take the sign out on release because it's just common sense. Okay. Whenever I've gone out there, every single time, almost without exception, I have been stopped by police. Whether they're local sheriffs, state police, border patrol people, whether they're coming in on their little ATVs or whether they're coming in by boats, they stop me. Roger and I were out there. We took a boat out. The sheriff showed up in the boat. And we asked them. They said, yes, we arrest people that are Rouses. Of course, times are different. Okay? But it was really important when, like I said, when I worked out this arrangement with the pods, I would tell this story. And I would explain to people that, yes, this is how you learn about Fort Montgomery. You can't go out there today on your own. Maybe someday. But for now, you can't go out there again on your own. Those days are gone. Except for the guy doing it, which you all want to take. The destruction of Fort Montgomery, I'm going to have to do this fast. Okay? It started here at Bastion A. What happened? 1936. Deep Depression. The nation is out in a world of hurt. People need jobs. We have one bridge across Lake Champlain, down at Crown Point. Government's ready to build another one up here at Rouses Point, in Alberta, Rouses Point. The military had declared Fort Montgomery surplus purpose property back in 1926, sold at auction. It went through a succession of hands. That's a fascinating story in itself. Let me tell you about that some other time. But anyway, in 1936, it ended up in the hands of a local boy named Andy Weston, contractor. Mr. Weston was the contractor. He had an idea. He said, you know what, we've got this old wonder of a fort over there. It was a mistake, never should have been built. We're going to tear it down. We're going to use it for fill. We're going to use it to build the Rouses Point Bridge. No one's going to care anymore. Okay? So in 1936, they started at Bastion A. Hired people. Put people to work. They were throw people. Okay? Started blowing up the walls. They filled in the moat. They brought in a huge bunch of earth-moving equipment. They brought in an enormous derrick, a crusher. You can see these guys putting in the dynamite. Here you have some of these people. I don't know if you can see their arms, but they're enormous arms. And what they're doing, they're taking this stone and crushing it so they can feed it into crushing. This is the officer's quarters. Okay. Here you have Bastion A, where the the demolition started, and it went north. Okay, this is the part, this portion of this today is still there. You still have Mr. Fish's flagpole. They've come in there quite a while. You still see the bits of it, basically. But you have that enormous crane. This is probably the only published pictures of demolition actually been previously published. The stone was actually crushed in this crusher. It was loaded. There you see, basically from due north, you have the crusher there. You see what the nasty things are happening with this book. You have the Western Company barges taking Fort Montgomery out to that bridge. The irony of this, the stone was not laid on the Vermont side. You know where they hauled it off to? Two different contractors built this bridge. It's the old thing about one person working on one side and they meet the other. Well, Weston was hauling the stone over to Vermont. The New York guy didn't want it. So the stone that was hauled off was taken over to Vermont. It wasn't put on the New York side. Okay? So there's still parts of Fort Montgomery over there on the old causeway on the Vermont side, not on the New York side. Bastion E going down. And we're going to take a quick tour of the building. I want you to see what we're going to do. We're going to start here at Bastion A. We're going to go across. Here we have Bastion A. You've seen this picture before. I want you to get a sense of what Bastion A is. It's the little smallest of all the bastions. Okay, you can see from these. This is Bastion A from the inside. Bastion A was unique in that it did not have, the only bastion that didn't have magazines in it. The reason it didn't have magazines in it is because it had another very, very important purpose. Okay? It's a little tiny magazine, a little tiny bastion. But Bastion A held something called trees. Okay? People would ask me, they'd say, do you hear about the secret passage? You know, what do you know about that secret passage? You know, well, secret passage books. It's the, well, think about it. Here's the secret passage. This is latrine. That's your bathroom window right there. Okay? The four latrines were built in the part of the fort basically stuck out as far as it could into the Richelieu River. Okay. So, if you were at war with Canada, all right, not only are you going to be lobbing shells at them, but you're going to be sending your stuff up the river. Okay? Because it's going to come in, it's going to wash it down the river up to Canada. So that's where the secret passage was. Okay? You actually have to see it. You can see it right here. Okay? But that was the claim to fame for Bastion A. Alright. Curtain number one. Curtain number one, basically, you can see it right here. Narrow section, one of the older sections before. Curtain number one had a very unique part, and it was basically where that water gate was. Now, water gate is actually a term from the fort plans. It was where the guns were brought in. The interesting thing about this is where the stone was actually brought in. Really, this fort was being built. So curtain A was quite an interesting thing. And curtain A actually had really kind of a bittersweet thing about it, because the guns were brought in there. That's where the stone was brought in as they were building it. And that's also where Andy Weston brought his barges to haul the fort away. So there's something kind of ironic about curtain A. Okay, here you have curtain A, basically from the inside. And there's something interesting about it. You notice the fine stonework is missing here over there. It's because curtain A was designed to originally have adjoining barracks for the soldiers. This is the actual plans for it. They were never constructed. Soldiers barracks were built. Let's hope it doesn't happen. You can see that there were these sets of barracks that were supposed to be built to adjoin curtain A and curtain 2. This is a very, very simple structure. Of course, it's just 2 stories down at Fort Finish. These are all very standard things. The water gate was the second of 2 drawbridges at Fort Montgomery. Okay. And here's this again from the original. You have the water gate. You have a cannon brazier above it. You can see it here. Okay. You can see this area here. But this was the business. This was not the front door, but the back door of your fort, if you will. Because this was not the main entrance. Okay. This is where it was. Another Modified plan, helping you to get a sense of what that looked like. This was the drawbridge went out, and it met up against that big dock that here that actually ran along Bastion Lane. Okay, very, very important structure, because all of this stuff for the fort came in this very important entryway here. Okay, there was an inner door right here. Okay, this is it. It was sheathed in iron. Okay, this actually was all built. There were two drawbridges in Montgomery. And I don't know how I ever missed this. The original pillow blocks for the axle for that drawbridge are still there. Okay, they're huge. They're huge. Thankfully, they are bolted into that place so nobody can ever take them. Okay, they're still right there. And this is the actual level. Weston took that fort right down to the level of the original drawbridge. And that's where the axle went. And that bridge went up, basically opened up from here out. It went out about 10 feet. Bastion B, now we're getting to the part of the fort that's still largely intact. You can see it there. You can see what Bastion B looks like in its prime. You can see Bastion B basically the part that started and went to the north. This was Bastion B shortly after it finished. I'm sad to see. It looks like something out of pictures I've ever seen from over too. Stairway, of course. This is Bastion B today. The stairway is gone, but a good part of Bastion B is still largely intact. We do have a view of Bastion B from the outside. Here's where the drawbridge was. Here's Bastion B. Of course, you have to identify the colors. Bastion B holds a rather unique feature for us. Okay, think about these bases I told you about. These bases work on this fort largely for the garter stroke, the life of the fort. Okay, the left and mark. Okay, Bastion B has something called the face. Not many people know about this. Okay, the face right here. Okay, it was not put by somebody on a boat. Okay. This, I'm absolutely convinced, was done by one of the original stonemasons who basically had a little idle time on his hands. And he basically did. But it's upside down. Face is upside down. You see he's done some scalping on the outside. Okay. I turned it around for you so you get a sense of it. But here's what the original handy marks, if you will, among the stonemasons. And it's right there on that stair here. Curtain 2, this is the part you see from the fort, from the bridge. That's what this looks like. This is what it looks like on the inside. This is what it looks on the inside. These were the casement. Each of these actually would have called a gun. Okay. And of course, we were dispatched to curtain 2 shortly after demolition. As I told you, a lot of the part is largely still there. The arches are there. But as you can see, as I mentioned, casement here is already moving itself up. This is what's called the scarp wall. You see it there. It was basically largely removed. All these casemates that you saw right here were taken down. Okay. So people don't realize that this part on the fort is really just a wall. Okay. Here you have curtain 2 from the outside. Beyond here, there's nothing but a scarp wall. You do have some of the original kitchens and storage rooms and sergeant's quarters and what you slept in. Okay, here's curtain 2 today, that bottom tier. Bastion C is, like I said, is the saving grace, because Bastion C is largely intact. Bastion C is the place you really need a good sense of what Fort Montgomery looked like. You can go there, because Bastion C is a gem. Okay. Here we have a wonderful illustration in that shape, showing the moat, the wet ditch, the Bastion C over here. We have the first bridge. There were 2 bridges that were built. One by an enterprising fellow who also ran the ferry. And this was the original bridge, because you have the drawbridge that finished. You're looking due north up the cover face. You see the counter scarp over here on that cover face. And of course, here you see that same area today. At low water. At high water, of course, this is low water. But you have Bastion C, which is largely intact. Some good views of the interior of Bastion C. This is tier 2 and 12 because it has the masonry casemates, masonry embrasures. Bastion C was unique and it had the 4 ovens. Okay. The ovens are still, well, I'll just see what it looks like today. A lot of there was an enormous amount of brick that was left in this fort. this work, most of it's gone. It's this incredible amount of brick that was taken out of Montgomery. Some of you may know, of your local folks, you may know where this brick is, but I know an awful lot that was taken out, including the fire brick of these ones. There actually would have been a wall right here, and there would have been a little tiny entrance to these ovens right here. There would have been a wall here. We're looking at the interior of these ovens. Likely these ovens never held a fire, because even though Fort Montgomery was designed for a wartime garrison of 800 men, that didn't happen. Most people that were ever garrisoned in Fort Montgomery, this is new information, of course, during the Civil War, there were 15 Union regulars who were garrisoned there for about 3 months. Okay? And I have that from the official War Department document. So that may not sound like a big deal. Okay? Because up until recently, people only believed that there was just a construction garrison. The civilian people who were building the fort were in Europe. But there were actually was a very small contingent of 15 Union regulars who were actually stationed at Fort Montgomery for a short period of time. These ovens probably never held a fire. The officers' quarters, officers had it much better off than the regular soldiers did, of course. And the officers' quarters were really very, very nice. They were right here, what's called the porch. You can see it here from the cover face. This is the parade wall of the officers' quarters. Inside these quarters, there were finely plastered walls. There were lovely lanterns, chandeliers. They were by far superior to anything else in the fort. See the officers' quarters being mocked here. These entire enormous arches. These arches were not visible here. There was an arch here. There was an arch here. There was an arch here. They were inside that to support the big guns that would have been up on top and over here. Now you understand those arches. They were inside that section. It's hard to recognize this as quarters today because it has been gutted so bad. You have fireplaces. There are a lot of fireplaces. These would have been finely plastered walls. There would have been brick and there would have been plastered, believe it or not, directly onto the floor. In order to really get a sense of what this looks like, you have to go to other forms. Here's the parade wall, the Sally Fort, that gorgeous and main. Windows, of course, the column is very, very similar to what Fort Montgomery would look like. I want you to get a sense of what this looked like. You would have had the arched ceilings. You would have had these wooden, when you have those big loopholes today, you actually would have had real plastic colored windows. You would have had plaster applied directly to the brick. Okay? And these were very, very impressive looking quarters. This is actually sitting out in the Atlantic Ocean. This is out in Castle Bay. So that's why I say it. But I mean, you see at least a sense of what these buildings look like. And of course, here you have the sense of looking out. You see the wooden floors, you see how. Of course, it's hard to understand it, but you see these enormous arches designed to support the big guns on top. The posture of the Sally Fort. When I was here in April 2004, I said there was no drawbridge. I was wrong. Okay, there was a drawbridge. I didn't understand it. The drawbridge, right here, was 20 feet long, made of oak. Okay, it was an incredible thing. The default position for that drawbridge was closed. There was a big pit right here. And that drawbridge would pivot. Okay? What happened is, you can see it down. You see how an apparatus right here. When this thing was closed, the 11 feet of it was inside the posture. Go down inside here, this thing would go up, straight up and down. 9 feet of it went out and met up with that wooden bridge that you see out there in all those pictures. So you have 9 feet that extended out. But the entire drawbridge itself was 20 feet deep. Okay? Here's your posture. 5-degree angle from the bridge down to the parade. Okay? This is the area that William Tecumseh Sherman went through when he visited Fort Montgomery shortly after the Civil War and said, "This is an amazing place. We're going to move that garrison from Plattsburgh to Rouses Point." Sure enough, he was true to his word. He went back there, he said we're going to do it. Of course, the good people of Plattsburgh had more clout than the people of Rouses Point, and evidently more clout than even General Sherman, because it never happened. But every time I go there, I think of Sherman, going through this posture. It's quite a thing. So I hope you get a sense of how that worked. You've got your drawbridge here, you've got your moat, and you basically have this drawbridge that works in an ingenious fashion. Inside the quarters, you have loopholes. Each side of that passageway there was rifle loopholes for the soldiers, so they could actually take and shoot through there. If people had got across that cover fence, if they had actually got across the drawbridge, got across the moat, if they had somehow managed to get into this postern, the last resort was, if they're inside this thing, there are these loopholes here. When they got point-blank range, they could take and actually fire on attackers. You see them right here. This is Fort Montgomery's loopholes. That's your postern. Okay? So here's a wonderful picture, same guy, showing part of the original drawbridge. Here you see it. Okay? There's your open drawbridge. Remember, there's an enormous pit down in there. That's about as rare a picture you can find. Pictures of that drawbridge open and the postern open are very, very, very rare. This is a gem. And picture of drawbridge, folks. Picture of here you have it today. Okay, hard to understand, hard to visualize it because it's so different. Andy Weston came in, he filled in the moat here, he turned stuff in. There's scarp wall, the outer wall came up to here. The drawbridge itself came out to here. This is where those people were standing in that picture. Okay, so you try to visualize this if you will. Here's your entrance to the fort. Here's those loopholes on each side of it. This was the main entrance to the fort. Okay. Here's your bridge. Here's your, this is before they even put up the handrails. Okay, here's your drawbridge, the 9 feet that came out. Okay, there's the bridge right here. Okay, there it is right there. Here you have it also. There were 2 bridges that were built there. This one did not last very long. A little later on, they had to build another one on big piles. Most of the pictures you see of the bridge are actually of that second bridge that's built on big piles, rather than the ones on the timber. Just a quick picture. Look at these pictures. Wonderful pictures of folks. There's the drawbridge in closed position. So, Bastion D. Sad story about Bastion D. I wanted to tell you about the why this embrasure is blocked up. I really can't, because we're out of time. But this was supposed to be a gun firing out. This is all bricked up. Okay? And key to it is right here. Okay? It's on the side of the magazine. You got a door where there shouldn't have been a door. Directly opposite an embrasure. They filled it up. This is civilian contractors that built these forts. Civilian contractors built the forts under the direction of one military engineer. Okay, mistakes happen. The door should have been here. And it was here. They put one here by accident. Then they come back and fill it in later on. Here we have poor Colonel Blunt trying to explain what happened. These are his handwritten notes. It was quite an awesome thing to get it to give up an embrasure. Bastion D, facing due north. All of these embrasures had guns. This was the side facing Canada. Okay? Bastion D collapsed in April of 1980. It was not demolished by the Weston Company. It was left largely intact as Bastion C was on the other side. I can't get into what happened, but basically you have a situation where something happened around World War II, some iron reinforcing rods. This is a very rare picture of that collapsed bastion. And so you have a situation happen much later after the demolition peak that actually contributed to April 1980 collapse of the fort. And this is what should have been the inside of the fort. It's not anymore. So you have the rods that were cut probably during the Second World War. Here you can see the outside of that. You can see the rods. You can see the scarp wall. Scarp was built intentionally to be separate from the rest of the fort. See what you got right here? Okay, this is your scarp. It was designed to take a beating by guns and still basically keep the rest of the fort intact. Okay, so it was built intentionally separate from the rest of the fort. Well, come in the 1880s, it started to settle. Okay, they put those rods in. And those rods were cut during the Second World War to basically assure Fort Montgomery. Okay. Here you have curtain 4, due north. You have this is Fort. This is not Fort Montgomery. This is Fort Jefferson, but it will look very, very similar to this. It had slowly mounted with dropping guns. Here we have it coming down in the 1930s. very sad picture indeed. You can see people up on the barbette here. You can see the casemates coming out. See they removed the soil. And then you have curtain. And Bastion, same type of thing. Very impressive Bastion. First one built. It was built early, so it had old style brick and great front bolts here, top and bottom. We have it coming down. You can see the iron thing, the recent portion, lots of tiny pots. And here's Bastion. And curtain 5, of course, very impressive. Very impressive. This is the interior of it. You can see the rods. You can see curtain 5 and 4 were the only ones that had wooden floors on the second floor. They were designed to be replaced. Plans have gone up and never happened. Here we have curtain 5 coming down to 6. And curtain. So, folks, we have a very sad situation. What was destroyed, of course, never was going to allow it to happen today. But it was a different time. A bridge was built. And yet, before Montgomery still stands. It still stands, and the fact is, what is there is still largely intact. And yet, that first bridge is gone, isn't it? That original bridge is gone. So, that is gone. So, the last thing I want to leave you with is thought here. This is from 1986. People ask me what I want to do with this work. Well, I said, my job is to tell the story. I know in the history of Rouses Point there have been one debate after another about what should happen with the Commons, what should happen with Fort Montgomery. Quite frankly, that isn't my job. It's owned privately right now, and I know that it is for sale. And I wish there was investment. I know they have their own interest to watch out for. They also, quite frankly, I believe, have to care about the port. There's always been a debate about how it should be used. Should it be used for industry? Should it be used for recreation? I'm working on one of the last chapters of my next book where I'm talking about, right in the 60s, there was a huge debate about putting up a campsite, just like out of Port Rush. And that never happened. Okay? I know that Mr. Senior had great plans for Fort Montgomery. He tried to give it to the government, to the state of New York. That didn't happen. Well, now the property's for sale. We'll see what happens. But, quite frankly, it's not going to be there forever. Each spring I get worried. And I don't have a tiny clue what I'm worried about, but this is from 1986. So I thank you all very, very much for your time. I know that I spent an hour and a half. I hope you don't mind. Thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate it.